One of the things that intimidates most homeschooling parents when they're starting out at the very beginning with young children is the thought of having to teach them to read. Unfortunately, a lot of mistakes are made out of that desire to do things right. And I think this advice is going to not only save you some stress, but it's also going to greatly increase the likelihood that your children actually love to read. The biggest piece of advice that I give to all parents of young children when they start talking about teaching their kids to read is to wait. It is so much better to start later than it is to start early when it comes to teaching reading. And here is why. Children have been designed by God to be hands-on exploratory learners in those first birth to like 7 years of life. And we even see this with toddlers. We put them in a high chair and we give them a spoon. And what do they do with the spoon? They drop it and they wait to see what you do. And you pick it up and you put it back on the tray and they drop it and they drop it and they drop it. And this game drives us crazy, right? Children are scientists. And what does every good scientist do? Repeat experiments to see if the outcome is the same. Yes, this is what kids are doing. They're looking to see, is there consistency in this world? What happens if I keep doing this? Mom said to stop or she's going to take it away. I wonder if she's serious, right? They keep doing it over and over because they are engaging in their world. They are exploring. They are discovering. They like to get their hands on stuff. They like to play. They like to be imaginative. That is how God has wired them to learn. And in that phase of life, that birth to 7 year phase, the vast majority of kids are wired to learn this way. They are not wired to learn by sitting down and formally working on things. And when we teach our kids to read, there is a very formal aspect to that because reading is not a natural skill in the same sense that like learning to walk and talk is. In order for kids to learn how to read, we need to sit them down and we need to explain certain principles. And there are ways that we can do this through advice piece number 2, teaching through life. And that is to not necessarily sit them down, but to just start talking about letters by pointing them out, by creating them in Play-Doh or writing them in chalk, or, when you're reading and you maybe are reading one of those books where the first word is really big or the first letter is really big, doing things like just pointing out those letters and saying what the name is and saying what the sound is, not drilling your child on it, not testing them on it, not requiring them to repeat it back to you or anything like that, but just pointing it out, making it a game, making it something you just kind of do occasionally through life. That is the best way to start teaching your children phonics, right? Which is the best way to teach. And the first step of phonics is teaching letter recognition and what those sounds are. But if you were to sit your child down and try to work on that formally, you would be working against their nature when you're doing that in the preschool, kindergarten years. Now, does that mean that children cannot learn that way? No, we see children learn that way all the time, right? But here's the thing. Their brains have all of these gates that stand between them and the ability to read. And there are all sorts of specific developmental stages and milestones that need to be reached for each of those gates to unlock. If any of those gates, let's say there's 10 of them, I'm just making that up, but let's say there's 10 gates, 10 developmental milestones that they need to reach. If they've reached 9 of them and there's just one left, that means that they're going to get some aspects of reading, but they're not going to be able to get them all. And what happens if we are trying to teach children to do something that they developmentally cannot do? They get frustrated. They start thinking they're dumb. They start thinking they can't learn. They start thinking, I'm never going to get this, right? We want to make sure that our children do not get this idea in their heads that they can't learn or that they're never going to learn how to read. And if we start them too early, there's a big chance that that's going to happen because we may see some of those gates open. They can sing the ABCs. They can identify, most or maybe even all of the letters. They're starting to get the sounds. And so we think, well, great. Hey, all you have to do to read is start blending those sounds together. So let's take the next step. If your child can do all those things, but then they can't blend the sounds, they're going to get frustrated, right? And it's one thing to try it and then say, oh, I guess your brain has not unlocked all of those steps yet. Let's wait a little bit and then we'll try it again in a month. There's no reason why you can't try things and then back off. That's totally fine. That's how we teach anything, right? We start teaching and then we see, oop, child has hit kind of a roadblock. They can't get past this roadblock. So I think we need to wait, let them develop a little more, let them mature a little more, and then we'll try it again later, right? That is a great approach to take when you're teaching them anything. But unfortunately, because parents are so paranoid about whether or not they're going to be able to teach their kids to read and their kids are going to be able to learn to read, what happens most times is that they push and they push and they push. And they say, well, if my child were in public school, the schools would be teaching them to read. They start reading in kindergarten. In fact, they're supposed to be able to read CVC words before they even get to kindergarten half the time now, which is ridiculous. This is one of the problems that I have with public school. They expect developmentally inappropriate behavior from kids. The vast majority of children are not ready to learn at kindergarten. Most boys are not ready to learn until 7 to learn how to read. And in fact, it could be later than that for some boys. Boys, for whatever reason, they tend to lag behind girls a little bit, generally speaking. And if we're pushing and pushing and pushing, what are we going to do? We're going to convince that child they can't read. We're going to convince them that they are dumb or they're not a good student. They can't learn. We're going to convince ourselves that we're doing something wrong. We're not cut out for this. It becomes this spiral that ends up leading to us thinking, I can't do this. I'm obviously not going to do right by my kids if I try to homeschool, and we end up putting them into public school. So step one, just wait. There's no reason to try to teach your kids to read before they're 7 years old, unless they're asking. And if they're asking to read, the best thing you can do is explain to them how their brain works. Baby, you're not wired to be able to learn to read yet necessarily. We can absolutely try it. Yes, let's start learning how to read. But if you struggle with it, if it's not coming very easily and you're confused and you're not getting it, that's okay. Because guess what? Your brain has these gates, and the gates all have to be open. And if some of them are still closed, it just means you need a little bit more time. So set them up with the proper expectations, help them understand the way their brain works, help them to understand that a lot of things that are hard when they're young will be easier when they're older, and that it's okay with you if they decide they don't want to read right now, and that they can wait, and that's okay. And you'll try it again another time. The third thing that you can do that is probably the second most important thing after just waiting to teach them how to read is to read aloud like it's going out of style. As much as your child will let you read aloud to them, do it. And this is one of those activities that you would not believe all the benefit your children reap when you teach or when you read out loud to them. Because not only are you modeling for them what reading sounds like, we inflect with our voices and we read questions in a way that sound like a question, right? We do that like little questiony thing at the end. That's a cue. We're teaching our kids cues when we do that. We're teaching what cadence of language sounds like when we read. And if they're sitting right there next to us and we're running our finger under those words, they're learning the correlation between the words that you're speaking and the words on the page. Some children will actually pick up reading just from that alone. Some kids are just wired, and that is just all they need, is just to hear you saying those words and seeing those words on the page, and they start connecting the sounds and the letters. You don't have to do the real slow one word at a time. That's artificial, and that's going to sound weird to them, and it's going to be weird for you to read that way. So keep your finger going at the same pace as your voice and read at a normal pace. That shows them this is how fast you go when you read. But you're also creating a warm, happy feeling around the concept of reading. If you make it like snuggly time on the couch or under the covers with a flashlight or in the tent that they built under the dining room table, you're creating these warm memories of reading being a time of connection and a time of getting to read these fun stories. And oh, mom always did the voices. And you're teaching them vocabulary. The more words a child has been exposed to, the easier reading is going to be, because as they come up to words they don't know and they start to sound them out with phonics, if they have that word in their brain already, then as they sound it out, it's going to click. Oh, that's invitation. Oh, that's invitation. I know the word invitation. Now I see how it's spelled. Now I understand how to read it. If they've never heard the word invitation, then when they get to it and they're trying to sound it out, it's going to be really hard. They don't know if they've got it yet because they've never heard this word before. So the more reading aloud you do to your kids, the larger vocabulary it's going to give them so that they're not only speaking with a better vocabulary, but they've got those words in their heads to connect with the words that they're reading once they actually start learning how to sound things out. So by creating this warm memory, it makes reading a fun thing, something that they want to learn how to do too, that gives them almost like in a Pavlov dog kind of way, right? So reading aloud, like the best thing you can do, start it as early as possible. If your children are like 5 or 6 years old and you've never really been big on the whole read aloud thing, it is not too late. Go to the library, let your kids pick whatever books they want. Throw in some books that are a little above them, because you want to make sure that's how they're getting that good vocabulary, is reading above the level that they could possibly read by themselves. And obviously they can't read by themselves yet anyway, but you don't want it to just be books like those dictionary books where it's a page of all these pictures, ball, cat, dog. Okay, that's teaching them vocabulary, sure, but you want them to hear sentences and paragraphs and narration and story. So get books of varying levels and read to them as much as they will let you. And it's okay to let them color or play with Play-Doh while they're doing that. Or maybe if they do like some sort of handicraft, like, sewing, like those lacing cards and things like that. It's okay if you've got fidgety kids and they kind of need to do something with their hands. Some people are just wired that way. And young kids, little kids at this age, in these early years, they're wired to be physical, to be moving. And it can be really hard for them to just sit with their hands in their lap and listen. So give them something that's going to make it easier for them to sit there for a while and to listen. Point out letters on the front of the book where the title is nice and big. Ask them what letters they know. Point out letters that they don't know. Tell them what they are. Ask them what sounds they know, and then move on. Go read the story. Don't make that part the lesson. Don't make it a lesson at all. Just make it a little activity and then read the book. If you'd like a little bit more data on the whole what's developmentally appropriate for education and how should we be teaching kids how to read, I have an article that's called Homeschooling in the Early Years, and there's a download on that too that might also help you with structuring your day, so that you're not getting bored and your kids aren't getting bored, but you're getting a variety of things going on. But that article talks specifically about reading in a particular section, and it links to some studies that might also help you to kind of see the big picture of why we teach the way we do. Down in the description, you'll see the link to that. Hope that's helpful for you. And I hope you've enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful, and I will talk to you again soon. Take care.